So this was a really interesting conversation today with John Ryan, three first names. He has such a cool background coming from the military and serving overseas and playing a professional sport, being a writer, and then parlaying all that into marketing. And he really talked about how the military helped him and his mindset for how to create strategies. And I just think that's such a cool thing when people take experiences that are in their past that don't have anything to do with what they're doing in their future or in their present, and they're able to kind of use those tools to kind of help create their own future, I guess. So John's super interesting. I really probably could have talked to him for another 45 minutes. I might have to have him on again just for the process of how he starts developing a strategy and all the touch points that he goes through. I bet you there's a really cool story in there as well. So you guys enjoy. Well, John Ryan, two first names. Do you have a first middle name too?
Of course.
Yeah.
John Carlton Ryan.
There you go. Carlton could also be a last name-ish. But yeah, you basically have three first names. That's kind of awesome.
Just switch them all around.
That's right.
It's like a puzzle.
Yeah. Well, dude, thank you for joining us today. This should be a lot of fun. Like, you have a really unique background where you've kind of transitioned from not laterally, almost like full pivot into something else. So so I don't butcher your history. Why don't you kind of go ahead and tell us a little bit about, like, go back the last 15 years and bring us to today.
Yeah, sure. I think the story ends with anybody can do marketing, or anybody can get into business, and you try to learn as much as you can along the way. And for me, I actually started as an Army officer and served some time overseas during the Iraq War.
Thank you.
That's all. It's what all of us did. All my peer group. I graduated from a military academy, and it was just something that we knew we had to do, and we all felt strong to get involved. And so during that experience, though, I learned some things from marketing that I didn't realize, and in retrospect helped me out, which was particularly my I would say slice of marketing is all termed growth marketing oftentimes. So yeah. I generally am on teams that try to build new channels or build new business or so forth. And from my military experience, I learned with dealing with uncertainty and not knowing what the outcome or the result that you're after, but yet leaning in, trying to understand it, think about it in some ways that are different, call it hypotheses, and then from there and go do that. And when you're overseas and serving in a place like Iraq, where not everything you do what the result's going to be, you just try to think it through what the best steps will be. If it's to help people in a community or it's to help make a region more secure, you do that. And so from my military experience, that was really impactful time for me, because I also got to understand, when you have limited information, how do you find information? And particularly, we tried to look for enemy within certain areas that didn't have digital footprints, right? So we couldn't track with credit cards or not. So how do you develop and understand networks was a big thing that I learned. Like, how do you put the pieces together? How do you know one person lives here and the next person? And how do you build out that network? And that became a lot of what I do in early, probably call it 2015, what we're doing in digital marketing, was try to understand keyword networks, right? Okay, how do we attach channels together? How do we look at the proverbial customer journey and stitch that together? So the military is really interesting at creating that mindset where I kind of got into uncertainty and then looked for the best information to use to make better decisions.
Yeah. I like to say it's like we're trying to solve a puzzle, and that's essentially a short version of that. I love that you're how to develop and understand networks. Like, that's a really elegant way to put it. That's cool. So all right, so 2003, and then so that explains the gap between when you went to Columbia, right? So Columbia started in 2009.
Yep. Yeah, so there I was I was really interested in military stories. So I wanted to go back and learn to be a better writer and really tell those stories of, people like me that served in the military, had to deal with all different types of interesting situations. So I did that for a few years. It was great. I met a lot of people, got to go to the White House, which was nice, and cover a Medal of Honor ceremony. Got to write about sadly missing soldiers. I got to write about heroics in Afghanistan. It was really fun, but over time, I was always an athlete and a team guy. So writing a lot of times is very independent. So I knew I wanted to get back into a different industry. And the storytelling kind of helped work out where I got into digital marketing and, enjoyed this notion of, statistics, probability, networks, and things like that. But also, you got to tell stories at the end, right? You got to connect with people. And so that was kind of the convergence of those two experiences in my background that led to this digital leadership program at 1-800-Flowers.com, which was one of the earliest that I can recall of a
Oh,
time period where there was a corporation saying, hey, we're going to triple down into new and emerging technologies, into analytics, into data, into e-commerce. And we're gonna find people with different backgrounds, but we're going to teach them how to do it really well. And so that's what I did at 1-800-Flowers for about 5 years, just learning the business in and out. And the thing I like to mention about 1-800-Flowers.com was that it was one of the earliest direct to consumer brands that had any type of scale online.
hmm.
And there's reasons for it, which we don't have to get into, but they could, they had a delivery network of florists around the country that they could
Hmm.
rely on to for same day delivery. And so it made a lot of sense, that model. There's other competitors in the region, but this is before, I would say, 2008 to 2012, where a lot of the more popular direct to consumer brands came into the fold. Warby Parker, Glossier is another one. Dollar Shave Club, of course, with their viral video. But this was a time that 1-800-Flowers was just thinking about this stuff in a different way. And the people I worked with and, my mentor and boss at the time were really, they just inspired you to think about marketing differently. We took ideas around product marketing and software development and put that into our production. So we viewed marketing in an agile way as well. And ultimately, I got to, get my hands kind of in on all of the major digital marketing channels at the time and really just cut my teeth and learn from people that are doing it really well.
That's awesome, man. That is. You glossed over it. You played some professional lacrosse.
2 games.
Yeah. Well, you
That's
know what? You were on the team though. There's not a that's a couple things. One is I tried out for a professional soccer team and did not make it. So that's one thing. And I played lacrosse once in high school, like for a season, and it was my dumb ass. I'd try to trap the ball with my foot and then scoop it up with the stick and then start running with it because that's all that I'd ever done my whole life. And they're like, "Hey, we need somebody that understands how to run on a field." I'm like, "All right, I'll go play." And it was a whooping. Like, but you playing that sport, that's a hard sport, man. And playing it at a professional level, regardless of whether or not you started every game, is it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I played soccer too in college. So
Yeah,
I wound up playing soccer and lacrosse at Army and, having to juggle both of them. But I think, what you learn at that is what you're talking about is you start with the fundamentals, you really dig in, you learn the technique, right? And then you work on that. And as you kind of grow in time, you understand the tactics and then the strategies and the systems. And then you have an identity at some point. It kind of works like that over time. And I think for me, I was coming out of the military at the time. You want to compete too. And it took a while because I served on active duty for 5 years before I could try out and get into professional lacrosse. So, I had some training to do, and then you get out there and, I met a bunch of awesome people. And then you realize, what people do and what it takes to succeed. And for me at the time, it was just great to be at that level. In retrospect, I probably wouldn't have given up. I would have kept going back and practicing. Like you hear of all these NFL players that are on the practice squad for
yeah,
3-4 years, right? And then they get their break. It just wasn't in the cards for me at that time in my life. But that's what you learn. Like the best of the best for a reason, and they're super good fundamentally, but they're also just keep at it, right? Every year they're getting better, getting a
yeah,
new skill, refining some technique, seeing how they can do things differently. So they really master one thing that really, I think, takes them to the next level or makes them super appealing,
yeah.
at the professional stage.
The thing that's hard to explain to people when you are playing against professional level athletes is the speed at which they're technically sound, right? And how much bigger and faster they, like, you see it from TV or from the stands. I don't think you realize how big and fast they are until you're a foot away from them. And that's, could you say there's people you're like, I mean, there were people that I'm like, man, that's just like that person has everything put together in a way that even if I was at my very best, I would have a hard time. That would be a really tough day against this guy, no matter what. And so I think that's an eye opening experience when you come up against people that take it that seriously day to day, every day. Like you said, always trying to get that 1% better and constantly trying to innovate, and accelerate their own development. So like I said, it's an experience for sure.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing that I'll tell you sometimes if you keep at it is that you can do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe the situation's not right, or maybe there's some things you need to learn, but you can compete. So, if there's a challenge, take the right steps to put yourself in that opportunity. And you
Yeah.
don't know. Sometimes you'll step up, or sometimes you catch a break. And if you're not in the arena, sometimes you're never be able to succeed. And for me, that was what I wanted to do, is just get into the arena and see what I had. And, I had a great training camp and things like that, but it's a business too, by the way. So
For
you got to
sure.
have the metrics to perform at that stage. And I learned, could I have done things differently? Perhaps, but it's okay. Like I was there, and, I tried. And like I said, I took a few lessons from it that I kind of bring to my business, approach.
Yeah, certainly. So let's kind of swing back that way. Let's kind of talk a little bit about, one of the things that I noticed about you is that you're an omni-channel marketer, right? So you're thinking about this 360 holistic view. And previously, one of the things that we talked about is how you get to that point, right? That's sort of like the end goal. But what's your process for developing a plan if the ultimate goal is to have a marketing strategy with breadth to it that's going to give you maximum visibility? Kind of walk us through that a little bit.
With any product or idea that we start with, and one is, I'll just add just some quick context to it. I look at omni-channel as the ability to get your product and connect it to as many people as possible in different places that you wouldn't normally be able to do that.
Mhm.
But before you do that, you really should have that product that you understand has white space, competitive advantage. It has something to it that you think is going to resonate. And then I think the last, before you really get into omni-channel, is just to make sure you pressure test it. You go and do, if it's certain types of products, usability testing. If it's on software, usability testing. If it's on physical products, get consumer reviews, get it in the hands of people, talk to them about how not only it solves needs, but it also makes them feel a certain way, or how likely they are to use it again. And from there, you start to develop, I think, confidence. And I kind of wrap this into product marketing when you really think about the features and the benefits that are answering what people want. So if you have that idea, then I just look in the scope. I use whatever metrics I can out there. It could be, look at keyword analytics that you can get your hands on. If you're on Amazon, go ahead and get into some type of, software. I use Jungle Scout or something like that, but go ahead and cast and understand the competitive landscape. See who's doing it right, who's doing it wrong, and look for those holes. As soon as you really get that, some people call it some product market fit, but what I think is you really establish a product that people are willing to pay for. And then from there, you validate it with, sorry about that, funny, with consumer reviews and feedback. And then from there, now you're looking at the appropriation. What the best channel that you think to get into the type of consumer you want. If it's younger, more digital, you'll make some selections there, right? Maybe you go direct to consumer and unlock with some social channels. It could be paid activations, it could be influencers, it could be just organic as well. But that's kind of my approach. You really got to figure out, what product is going to meet that need, and then where you're going to play, where you're going to win, then where your channel focus is, and then what type of operation systems, messaging, support, designers, whatever you need to really activate those channels.
Yeah, no, I think that's super smart, right? You're creating a foundation, you're understanding, the problem solution ecosystem between the product and the service, and when you were saying like you have to pressure test your product and you've got to you've got to go through and get feedback. I think that's the same thing with services too. So it's you kind of have to go through and you said once you start to get some positive feedback, then it develops confidence. I mean, I'm reiterating these things because that I feel these same things, as an agency owner, that we develop something, we run it out, we improve it, we run it out, we improve it, and you start to develop confidence behind that, and then you really can start running. And I think that's where your omni channel comes in. To your point, yeah,
Yeah, crawl, walk, run. I mean, a very, very simple cliche.
Yeah.
right? But that develops the confidence too. And what happens there is then you can make some better bets along the way because you're always going to have trade-offs. You only have a certain amount of capital. If you have a P&L to answer to, you're going to have a certain amount of money or return or a ROAS that you need to develop from it. So you really want to get to the point that you feel confident in the product and you have those signals early. Otherwise, you're going to be optimizing and iterating on meta ads, or it could any TikTok ads, whatever you might have. We're looking at Google Shopping, whatever it might be. You're going to try to keep squeezing that, and your time could be spent elsewhere. To be honest with you, and you need to be able to understand when to walk away from a channel sometimes, or when to push forward too. That's equally as important.
Yeah, and what you're saying too, and we will have people, prospects, clients come to us from a tactical perspective. When you bring up Meta, like, hey, I want to be on Amazon, right? And you're like, okay, well, let's talk about this because you sell kittens, and I don't know that we want to be shipping live cats in boxes, but but yeah, I mean, you do have to come at it from that strategic approach and then tactically figure out what works and not be married to that tactic and be able to step away from it if it's not giving you that result that you were really looking for. And I think that probably is a real problem that people say, I want to be on TikTok, right? I'm running the TikTok thing. And you put all these resources into it, but you're measuring the wrong thing, or you were never looking at it from the right perspective in the first place, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the bets. And as marketers, you got to be honest. You can measure lots of things, not everything. And when you roll it up and stack it up to the finances, I haven't been at a place or a company that really doesn't have to make that chance where it says, hey, we want to do TikTok ads in a big way. We have an investment, right? And then we have an operating cost, whatever the media spend is, and so forth. We have a creative cost as well of time, energy, resources. You're going to have to make a call on it. And then TikTok ads isn't going to drive every direct sale to you. You're not going to be able to measure everything. And then if you're especially running omni-channel, which we do, and we try all different types of things at the same time, there's no tool in the market that's going to allow you really to tease out that true that,
Yeah.
that true impact. I mean, incrementality testing, all that stuff is fantastic, but it is a little directional. And so you gotta be very cautious about what I think your belief in the product, and then what those bets are you want to take. Because even some of the channels that you're working on, you need a scaled amount of money in order to get there to really ascertain whether or not you're doing it right. And then whether or not in the brand or the straight financial side, you got to make that call, right? I just want to get the name out, drive awareness so people have recall. Or you want to say, no, I run a type of business. I need a direct result from the media or the advertisement I'm running. And those are two different mindsets that haven't totally been figured out yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And what used to be maybe more, we used to think about paid search as this, and it still is this very unique thing where it's the only, medium where it's demand generated, right? You've got hand raisers saying, I want to buy jewelry, or I want to buy your jewelry. And then all you have to say is, hey, look, I've got it. I've got exactly what you're looking for. And you go here. But the conversion rates have changed dramatically, right? With competition and with mind share and with all these other pieces that something that used to be kind of yep, this is going to work for you. It's almost just another awareness tool as much as it is an activation tool, which is, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, it was a little bit more effective at doing that.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that in the trends. If you study the history a little bit, and I think marketers coming up now shouldn't. I know the tools that you have at your fingertips. You should look back in the evolution of kind of digital marketing, where it really started with blogs and SEO and content marketing, and then finally moved into PPC when that was Google search came aboard, and then that evolved into Google Shopping. There's a trend to it. Every time you get to a certain place within these channels, and it evolves, it becomes very dense and it's very mathematical, right? More advertisers want to get on these platforms, and the way the bidding structures work, they increase costs. And so you have to find new outlets and get creative, and you can't be on all of them at the same time. A lot of times it's just the way it goes. Brand search, of course you can harvest that demand off of Google and any other platform, but that's because you already created awareness for your product some way.
Yeah.
So you're just really kind of reaping the benefits of that. So how did you create that awareness? And you got to look deeper into there to really understand and understand that cost benefit ratio, because it's just not the same. Influencer marketing isn't the same outputs as it used to be.
Yeah.
And everybody's jumping into it. So everyone jumps in, and now it becomes a lot more competitive and costly. And so, where are we going next? TikTok Shops is about to launch. That's a very interesting direct activation platform. I think it's going to be a big deal. we're exploring things like that. But what's after that? What are the next emerging channels? You got to keep an eye out open for.
Let's talk a little bit about influencer marketing. I mean, what, kind of where your CPG stuff that you're in right now, like that's right up that alley. Are you guys effectively using it out of it now? What's your whole thought on that ecosystem?
Yeah, I think it's a great tool. I think we're still using it. I've worked at different businesses that used it to different lengths, right? So went more macro, wanted to have, very large, I would say, followerships or, viewership and engagement. We've gone down that route. It's much bigger bet, more costly, fixed fees and all that. And then we've also gone more niche, where you're looking to work with, I would say, community advocates and people with much smaller followings, call them micro influencers, and then just try to really scale it. But again, the attribution on it is not going to be direct in every way. That's not how influencer marketing works.
Yeah.
And so you have to really figure out if it's best for the business and run those models over the long term.
I feel like it's the same thing as when clients used to say, "Hey, I need you to make me a viral video." Like they thought they were going to do one YouTube video and their product was going to blow up. Because you hear these stories about, getting a product with one influencer and all of a sudden everything's off the shelves and you can't, you're just having a hard time keeping up with demand, and that's not the reality of that of that tactic.
No, and I mean, honestly, there probably is a method and magic to that, but it's got to be around the product too. You know what I mean? If the product has to hit some type of zeitgeist, the product has to have those inherent marketing qualities for it, and maybe really good spokespeople as well, and people who really know how to sell stories and get people engaged. But there's going to be a life cycle to it. It's going to have ups and downs. But I've worked in products that are, I would say, more long term. And so how do you keep developing interest over time and exploring that? And that goes back to, just I think executing on the end quality where people value your product. And it could be jewelry. I've worked in hair dye. I've worked in pet care. If you deliver that satisfaction, you have a way better chance of getting there. And I think for early marketers, focusing on that and really understanding that product, speaking clearly about it, understanding points of difference, and then trying to figure out really interesting messaging to get people excited about it. And that's what I think we're talking about, viral videos and things like that, where it's just some new take that's probably unique and probably you can't really replicate. But it could be a crazy giveaway or something like that we've done in the past, or something that really captures the attention of the moment.
Yeah, I like you said this earlier, which was the first thing you should do is learn to write about your product, and then start figuring out how to communicate that to other people. Is that, I like that process. Is that how you always start with it? Is just like, get a pen and a piece of paper and just start talking to yourself about it?
No, because if you work, I mean, there's different things. Now I'm working on an emerging brand. It was founded in 2018, so it's not very old. Other times I've worked on more legacy brands. And so, a lot of that's there, but my approach would be read as much about the product as you can beforehand. Really understand. If people did it before you to establish how we speak about it, tone of voice, differences, benefits, memorize those. It'll just make you a better marketer. And then from there, you kind of have to work as an extension of that company. So when I was working at Flowers, right, I worked on the extension of delivering smiles. But where I'm at now, we just went through a brand renovation so we could reestablish the messaging that we want to tie around our products.
Yep.
And that takes product marketing. That you have to work with production teams, engineers, scientists, researchers, whatever you can understand, and bring together the consumer mindset, what they can do. And so it might just be like, hey, we want to produce high quality jewelry. That's great. What are we really doing differently? Well, if you dig in, we do plating differently. We run testing differently. We do all these things that allow a marketer to say, okay, now I got a place to play. I can go talk to people about this. And guess what? TikTok might be a great place for us to showcase our jewelry underwater. Let's come up with a really creative way to communicate this benefit and get really, some great influencers to help us do that because they know their audience better.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love that. So, obviously you've touched a couple times on return on ad spend and, analytics and ROI. What are you using to track that, and kind of how do you feel about GA4?
GA4 is more of an analyst's tool, right? It takes a little deeper understanding. It's not intuitive as universal analytics. And
Nope.
so that's a trouble. The other thing is, this is everyone deals with this, but in-tool reporting versus something like GA4, but I used to use a lot of last click because I was trying to map it back to financial results.
Mm-hmm.
So order for order, right? And what you always see in your marketing channels is duplication of credit.
Yep.
And so for me, I kind of run a couple different things. I will work on, if we look at web analytics or something like that, of course, I'm going to look at a front end tool like GA4. But I'll look in, if you need more behavioral analytics, sometimes you can look into, it could be Meta Ads, it could be TikTok, Pinterest, whatever you want to use. And then I like to just go over and then just use some pro and post kind of, I would say, lift testing. It's not perfect, none of it is, but
Yeah.
through these three methods, you can get somewhere to the truth. Um, and then from there, because I work omni-channel, then you have all the other channels like Amazon. We're currently kind of scaling Macy's.com and stuff like that. So they all have their internal tools as well. And so
For
it's
sure.
now a balance of kind of managing all these budgets that are going across for all these different types of campaigns, and then figuring out how it all comes together to make a cohesive plan and drive the business forward.
Are you using anything to centralize that? Are you using any other tools to kind of put that in one place, or is this just like manually or team based, where people are pulling stuff from different places?
No, I think there's been a bunch of software developed around this,
Yeah.
but just in our phase, it doesn't make a ton of sense right now based on our maturity to go ahead and get a large scale tool. I think there's a bunch out there. I think like Channel Advisor is one of them or something like that. So
Yeah.
but more or less, it's like, I grew up in digital marketing a little bit, so I kind of know that we have to have certain returns per channel. You have to see which, you have to see, say, rankings and things like that, and impression share go up. And so that's kind of how in these different discrete channels that are more sales based, like Amazon, Macy's.com or something like that, that's where I manage it. And then we have a direct to consumer business as well. So it's kind of piecing it all together.
Yeah, no, that's a lot. I got to imagine that easily 30 to percent or more of your job is stitching this data together and then developing an insight out of it, because it's not linear. It's not like you're not going and saying, okay, we had X number of people that did this, this, and this, and it resulted in this much money. It's using intuition, and like we talked about, it's putting the puzzle together to say this is happening over here, and as that tide goes up, this boat over here is going down, and we have to figure out why and what's happening, right? So that's
Mhm.
probably most of your job, I would assume.
And some of it before when I've worked in omnichannel is cannibalization, right? It's just understanding that and then, figuring out ways to make one channel. I would say it could be there's like simple strategies, right? Like people just do different assortments by channel, right? So then therefore you're pulling in different types of consumers. If I'm working in jewelry, you could do that. But ultimately, I think we've established that we're going into places that for the particular brand now, we know we have consumers that are people that would really like to be introduced to our products. So we're assuming it's going to be a lot of incremental benefit. Other places that maybe you're more of a national brand and you might have cannibalization, right? Because if you go onto Amazon, and that might take away from in-store sales or other places, and that's I think a hard decision to make. But if you're doing marketing well holistically, then I all boats will rise, right? I mean, you don't have to make those trade-off decisions if if you're doing marketing well at a national level or halo level with could be CTV or audio or whatever you want to do. You'll see that benefit in brand demand across those channels, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that, and certainly depending on what, where you are. I mean, if you're in any industry where an outside rate, like a mortgage rate, or something like that can affect your industry, it's a it's a tough thing, because we give, I think the thing is, we give way too much credit than we should, and we give way too much blame than we should to marketing in a lot of cases. When the reality is that there's 75 factors that really are coming into play to push that, and you might have control of 10% of them.
Yeah, I mean, the marketing is interesting because I've been in some places that view marketing as depending on because the naming conventions change, but almost as a revenue. generation tool or growth, right?
Yeah.
Other places view it more of as a service. Other places view it as the leadership, right? Who understands the consumer the best. So they're going to set the strategy. In the end, everybody has to really piece it together.
Yeah.
If the creative isn't really reflective of what you're doing from a technical standpoint, from research, if you're a consumer good, then it just won't resonate. And so, as much as I think marketing sometimes is the front end or the person out there, really promoting the product to the public, it really starts way back with everybody from finance, PD, product development, marketing, creative, all operations to make it happen. And that's the way I really like to view it and communicate it is. And it's a shared win. An ad buys, that's different. You can view it differently, but man, does the product matter when you do an ad buy? I mean, you can have the best ad, and there's countless organizations that have failed, despite the best efforts of people like you and I. And that's just because of timing or product, or maybe they missed on the consumer need.
Yeah. I was thinking you talked about timing, and this is way off subject, but I'm bringing it up anyways. I was driving home the other day, and I was thinking about what the timing of when things happen, like when it comes to rates, or when it comes to launching a business, or when it comes to launching a product. And I think I had this like pain in my heart for somebody who spent $100,000, outfitting a kitchen in January of 2020, and then all of a sudden everything got shut down. Things that are so far out of your control that you could have had the best food, the best marketing, the best of everything, and it wouldn't have mattered. Like, it was just something that was so far out of your control that ran it into the ground.
I think the whole industry is seeing it. It was an anomalous event.
Mm-hmm.
It changed. But I think coming out from you, and I've spoken to, colleagues and other people, this is the time now. This is like we were talking about pro athlete, stepping in and trying to do it at your best. I mean, you had an advantageous scenario that happened to you if you worked in digital marketing, specifically e-commerce. Now it's time to reset and say, okay, that was a great win. We executed well, but the situation and the conditions have changed. So how are we going to step up and do it better or change our approach? Um, and that's the way I view it. I mean, if you just look at the statistics, I mean, if you look at kind of, I would say CPM buys, ultimately on say something like Meta, it'll tell you the story.
Yeah.
2.5 years ago, they're $6 in certain areas. I've seen it. And now they're double. And so mathematically, you'll be structurally leading yourself and your P&L the wrong way if you keep just thinking you can drive there.
Yeah.
So what was the benefits of it? You ask yourself. Well, one is you got advertising, you got reach to people that were engaged, and you got to maximize your dollar. So what is that next channel going to look like where we can do it? It might be too fragmented now because in some ways we've digitized everything. So it's all CPM and it's expensive. There's no broadcast television buy that can get you in front of so many people and monopolize that consumer headspace. And
Yeah.
so now it's like, where do we go next? And I think that's where I'm most interested in omnichannel is that fragmented buyer. But the benefit is you get to find people and you have data to help you find the people that'd be interested in. When years ago you'd have to go more mass.
So our, you kind of, you sort of brought it up a little bit, and this is a question wrapped up in a statement, which is, our thought leaning forward is, how do we own as much of the conversation as possible? So how do we sort of defragment the message, and take it away from Meta and take it away from Google, and and as AI starts to be, as Bard takes over Google, how does your SEO get affected now when they're showing way different data than they were before? And so, if our thought is, if you're not owning your customers' contact information and conversations and prospects and all that from a very direct standpoint, that I'd be really afraid if we weren't doing that. And so, how are you guys managing that thought process from a consumer product standpoint?
It's more like, how are we managing against changes in SEO on Google with AI? Is that the question?
No, yeah, that was a really meandering thought that I kind of put out there.
Yep.
Basically, the idea is that you talked about fragmentation, right? You've got all these different
Mhm.
channels that you've got to be in, but they're all fighting for dollars. The inflation, all these things are an issue, and they're all trying to own your customer data, right?
Mhm.
And what are you doing to take that ownership back and to say, these are our customers. That data that you have on them, those aren't your customers, they're ours. And how do we, how are you centralizing that for yourselves?
Yeah, so we have a customer data platform that we manage all of that type of data in. Um, data to speak directly with customers. It could be email or phone numbers and stuff like that. And so that's that, and we're going to continue to do that because we want to have a direct relationship with our customers. And then obviously you got to create meaningful content for them.
Yep.
And that's kind of like, I think the other theme is, I think there was a time period where you could create content and scale content and you could benefit. I think now is the time for being super thoughtful about answering consumer questions or whatever content you're producing. It just, you can't. It's the competition. There's so many more pages that are indexed now. There's so many more voices out there and mediums. And so whatever you're going to do, make it really strong. Spend more time on the quality of it than not. In consumer goods, that's going to change a little bit. I'm not really sure where it's going to go. But when you get an email communication, of course, you're going to have to promote products, and it's going to be customized in some way for you. But what's the next level of adding value to them? I think that's unexplored. And I think an old marketer would be like, get in front of people, right? Get in front of people as many times as you can, create an impression. You don't know when somebody's going to need a tire,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
you got to create that, your Michelin is the place to go to get a tire. I think based on the algorithms and what's happening is like, that won't be as possible now. If you look at just everything from like inboxing and deliverability, I think it'll be suppressed. So unfortunately for marketers, you're going to have to deal with, I think, a trending down of the efficiency of, I would say, direct email and SMS marketing.
Have y'all used any SMS in your experience?
Yeah, in a couple different organizations, we used SMS. Yes,
Yeah, and that customer or conquest?
mainly customer.
Yeah, and but that's opt-in stuff, so that's
Hmm.
usually pretty straightforward. I've been getting a bunch of garbage, not just like, "Hi, is this Bob?" Like not that, but where just from companies that I didn't give them permission to do it, and I think that's a breach of trust in a lot of ways. And I don't even think Apple's doing a good job of when you report it and block it. That I've still had stuff come through from the same company, which is kind of amazing to me that they're so privacy geared, yet they'll let those things get through. But yeah, it's interesting about the email deliverability because email is such a powerful way to do it. And like I said, I really do think that figuring out how to have more direct relationships, and I love your point about content that's really more focused on their individual needs is going to be really important, right? As opposed to creating 50 posts, how do you create one really, really good one that's focused on, your advocates? But how are you getting it in front of them if you don't have their emails and you want to get in front of them? How would you suggest to do that?
I mean, that's the power of social marketing, right? I mean, that's where, for in that specific channel, I think just doing more and more and more, I think there's going to be an erosion of that over time, just because of just the way these operations work. People don't want to receive every email from you if you send every day. There's just no utility in it.
Yeah, no.
Um, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, I think there's a lot of, I think, really good opportunity to test and be super creative without your social channels. And if it's for a product, it's always tough, right? Because at the end, it's for a sale. It's different. I think it's a
Mhm.
different type of marketing than if you're a service or something like that. But you have the opportunity to create content in a new way that, like, they will share. It will get out there. Now, will it be as efficient as, say, a direct ad on, say, on a non-branded search on, say, for instance, Google? Maybe not, but that's for you to figure out. But there are those pockets, and we've seen it. One customer that we have not paid for is not an influencer. They go out and they create an interesting video around our jewelry, and we'll see that, and it'll generate its own audience. And from there, there's direct benefit for the business. But it was just because she spoke to her community the right way and they engaged with it, and it kind of then spread.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump around a little bit here. You were talking about Macy's. Are they developing? And I'm not in consumer products. So is Macy's developing kind of a Amazon competitor? Is that what I gathered there? Is that right?
Yeah, so last year they launched a marketplace.
Okay.
I think when you look at a lot of retailers, like I said, I'm in consumer goods. A lot of them have introduced marketplaces similar to Amazon, similar to Walmart, similar to Target. Macy's has also come on. So you could be a third party seller if you're invited, and then you can therefore sell your goods. But from the digital side, it's you just don't. You can then optimize right through SEO, content, catalog, all that stuff. Ads come into play and so forth. So I think it gives people that have the opportunity to get into these platforms and understand how they work gives them a competitive advantage.
Yeah. Tell me about y'all's, what's your relationship with Amazon?
Amazon, I've worked on a couple times in different places. I've worked on it as a 1P, so a direct vendor, and I've also worked at as a 3P, where Amazon, if you're familiar with the parlance, is FBA and it's
Mm-hmm.
filled by them. And so I've worked in both those models.
Okay. And what do you, I mean, there's, I think Amazon was in a lot of ways sort of friends to, friends to the affiliates, friends to the consumers, friends to the sellers. And that is sort of is a little bit of a shell game. They've moved that around about who they're being buddies with at a particular time, because you can't support everyone effectively all the time. And so where do you kind of, from y'all's standpoint, how do you feel about the way that, where they are now and how they treat y'all's relationship? And, is it a necessary evil, or is it something where you're like, yeah, we love it?
Well, for if you're a brand and you've already developed a national awareness, so you have great penetration, you're going to have to consider it much differently. If you're not and you're emerging, I think you have an opportunity there because consumers are interested in transactions. They're doing product research. The third-party tools, since I've recently got reacquainted with them, are much better and more evolved. And I think you have an opportunity to compete if you have the right goods. Plus, you have a ton of data on research and how to spotlight kind of gaps and holes. And I think it's an opportunity everyone should think about. And there's a lot of, I would say, instances in the past where people do a really good job of product marketing. They become a seller and then they sell to an aggregator or wherever. But I think when you look at the brand side, you got to understand is if your customer's there and you're willing to go in and work up the P&Ls and figure out you're willing to spend X percent on basically listing fees. So it's not a place to play for everyone, but if your margins work, I think it's a really interesting tool, one to sell and to really grab insights. Because I think you could see all the different types of products in your category that are working and not.
Yeah. Even from a consumer standpoint, I've, there's a point where it's like I hated it. And then I'm like, all right, I kind of like this. This is fine because I can get some things that I want. And now I feel as a consumer tension between the brands and Amazon. So like if I wanted a product that the brand, and there was something I bought recently, and I'm like, man, I shouldn't have done that. But instead of buying it directly from the brand because I wanted it faster or free shipping, one of the benefits, I bought it from Amazon. But when I did that, I negated like their return policy. That was 10 days at Amazon and 30 days if you buy it directly from the brand. And so there's this tension that the consumer feels because of, Amazon's rules versus the brand's rules. And I think there's always, it's kind of a game in there. And you have to be thoughtful about what you're buying and what you're actually saving and where, what you're moving around as a consumer and what's important to you.
Yeah, and I think that if you think your new customers are there,
Mm-hmm.
then I think it's a good place to play. I mean, you can come up with a complex, I would say, decision-making criteria. And again, all brands of different sizes are different. But if you think you have a new customer that's there and you want to have a presence, there's not a lot of, I would say, counterpoints that say you shouldn't get involved and test it. Now, the models that you use and so forth, it's much higher conversion rates, I would say, traditionally from other direct-to-consumer sites, depending on your market again. I mean, but
For sure.
generally it is. And then you get into an ecosystem where people can shop other things, and then you can target and use all their tools. And Amazon Ads has evolved over time as well. So depending on your brand, if they're the right size, and if you're a high-end luxury brand, maybe you don't want to do it. But for every other competing brand, there's a way to win there. You just have to figure out if you want to test through it yourself.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a good point with everything is yes, there's such things as best practices, but test it all, right? You never know. because everything's going to be a little bit different. Timing's going to be different. The market's going to be different. So test it all. So, but yeah, but listen, we're up against time. So I really appreciate you joining us today. I mean, honestly, I think you could probably put together a linear sort of masterclass of like how you start your journey of developing a plan and and going all the way through it. We bounced around so much and 40 minutes that and mostly because of me, because I was asking you questions that were off topic. If I'd have planned it better, I would have said, okay, let's talk about your thing from start to finish, because I think you've got a lot of really good insight for people about how you would organize, your strategic plans and maybe whether you know it or not, the process that you go through to get there. So I think you got a lot of good insight today. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you invited me on. It was fun. And the other thing I kind of leave you with too is like when I was thinking back through it, get with people that kind of foster your learning. I don't think marketing is going to change in the fact that it's every day it's evolving. And so, work with a good agency that you can partner with and really have good discussions with. And they could teach you and you can teach them about the product. Find a mentor out there and don't hesitate to dive into a new platform. You don't have to be on it tomorrow. I mean, think about this stuff. It's been around for a while, but if you want to get good at something, it's going to take time and energy and commitment. And so if you want to learn how to be a really good digital marketer or own a new channel, dig in, figure out why Amazon's going to be good or bad for you. Get a certification blueprint, and I think with that, that's it.
Cool, man. But if anybody's got any questions for you, how should they get in touch with you?
Yeah, direct message me on LinkedIn.
Okay, there you go. That'll work. Well, cool. Yeah,
I think I'm getting a call right now. I gotta go get it.
So. All right, man. I appreciate it.
All right, take care. Thanks.
Yep.
Bye.
So John hit us with a bunch of good stuff today. I think we really could have had a whole nother podcast from him. For takeaways from this, I think to start with is really, really get to know the ins and outs of your product and your service. If you're starting in a new company or if you're in the process of developing a new product, like read everything you can about those products, or read everything you can about the services and really understand that language and the tone of how people have talked about it in the past. And that'll kind of help you to create that narrative in the future. And then, and maybe even rewrite it for yourself. And I don't know that he said that directly, but I heard that somewhere in there. And I really like that idea of just rewriting it. I think putting it in your own words, using direction from the past can be super helpful. So I think that was a really good piece of what he put in there. And he also said, like, before you start thinking tactically is to think about that having a good foundation of what you're going to say and who you're going to say it to, and it being that connecting, engaging type message. And then from there, you can start to tactically figure out how to use different channels to push that message out there. And again, I might have said this and not him, but then you're not tied emotionally to a tactic or to a channel to say, I want to do TikTok or I want to do, Meta. So there's some really sage advice and having a good plan and a good understanding of the product and the message and the people before you start thinking tactically. And, another thing that I say is a huge takeaway here is to pressure test your product and your service and to find the faults and improve on them and get feedback and get reviews and get customer testimonials. And this will help you to create confidence in what you're doing, which ultimately is going to help in how you talk about it and how you sell it and how you present it. So I love that. And I don't think anybody at any point is above pressure testing products and services. You can always go and see how you can improve on it and how you can make it a little bit better. So the last big takeaway, and I think this is important for brands, for business owners, for marketers, for agencies, whoever, is that you can measure lots of things, but you cannot measure everything. And we have all this data at our fingertips and we have all this information available. In trying to understand why one person bought something and exactly what tactic or what ad made that happen is not only is it not difficult, but it might not be totally possible. And it's such a small sample size. What are you really going to learn from it anyways? And so if we're doing our job job as marketers and we're doing the things that we need to be doing, and we have a good solid plan based on knowledge of the product, knowledge of the consumer, knowledge of the pain points and all those things, then you'll see consistent increases in profits and losses and return on ad spend and all that stuff. So being micro influenced by every little thing that happens is I don't know if fool's errand is the way to put it, but maybe isn't the thing you need to be focusing on. So you can measure lots of things, but you cannot measure everything. So, all right. Well, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, share, comment, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, and be on the lookout for the next episode of Unreasonably Optimistic. Thanks.